taking over now. So thanks a lot. Uh, you know, that's a request since morning. Like many of them couldn't attend. That's why. And then I just want to start. Thanking you all. And what Atsa said, I would like to echo that. And um, we are quite, in that way. This is something providing us an opportunity to meet with you all online, of course, and then extend our solidarity. So I just want to talk a little bit for some of you may not have, I'm sure most of you know about PHM, but we are a global people's health movement, and it's a network of grassroots health activists, academics, civil society organizations, and social movements. And then it started in 2000, and now we have a presence in over 80 countries with over 40 active country circles and affiliated networks. We have almost 11 to 12 at global level, and many are working at the regional and national and local levels. And then we have, these are the key programs of People's Health Movement. One, we have a report which comes up from the case studies and the experience on larger issues. It's like an alternative health report called Global Health Watch. And we do build a capacity building of young people in different regions, different parts of the world. It's called International People's Health University, depending on the context and the issues the region is interested. Then we have Health for All campaign. I'll talk about it in a minute. And we do have global governance and health, where do we do the watching the whether it is the World Health Organization or other larger institutions and transnational institutions too. And we do have People's Health Assembly, which is all of us coming together. We just had in this year, which brings together large number of activists across the globe, and then to come in and take up the issues, and then sharing and exchanging our experiences, and then taking forward the struggles. So this is we do have a secretariat, and then we joined by Roman here. He is the global coordinator of PHM, and lots of volunteers. And we do have a small team which is looking into the like Miguel, who's looking at the communications and then looking into all these activities. And then we have these thematic groups which are very important for us under the Health for All campaign. One is on war, conflict, and occupation, and we look into the equitable health systems. We do have a thematic group. We have gender justice and health. That particular thematic group is organizing today's webinar. And we have environmental ecosystem, and we do have nutrition and food sovereignty, and we do have trade and health. These are the thematic circles which come under the Health for All campaign to build and strengthen our own understanding, and also, taking up our campaigns on different issues which are emerging from these thematic discussions. So, whoever is interested can join these thematic campaigns. We can share the website of PHM so that you can write to us. As Atsa said, I'm not going into it. This is something which is very, very important for us, which, this starting from November 25th to December 10th, and not only at the global level, but even at the regional level, at local level, we are trying to organize this campaign and then make sure that we get local voices can be heard. And that is very, very important to reaffirm our commitment towards the health and gender justice. So this is something which Atsa has already mentioned in the beginning. I'm coming to the, today's and also the ongoing work from the People's Health Movement at large, and also from both the thematic groups of war and conflict and gender justice. We are looking into, PHM has a presence in Palestine. We do have a PHM chapter there, even in Lebanon. And, what there is, we are continuously campaigning against the ongoing genocide in Palestine and attacks on Lebanon, and also increasing violence from war, conflict, and occupation, and also displacement in various regions like South Sudan or Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Tigray. We had a webinar on Tigray and many more. We face a world order that is growing more supremacist and then imperialist. So people's lives are shaped by unspeakable violence, starvation, economic oppression, and social and political domination and control, which we are all familiar. Health and human rights are being denied, as we know, and the democratic processes are being completely undermined. So, in that context, we started this, campaign, and then trying to strengthen it much more. I'll begin with the Palestine. I'm sure we have speakers, and then they will talk about it. I'm not going to talk about the context and situation, but one point we would like to say that while governments in the global north, they continue to ignore the genocide in Gaza, health workers and activists are demanding accountability. That's where PHM comes in. PHM is a health network, and then we think it's very, very crucial to talk about the health system, how it has been impacted, and the health of the people. That's something which we would like to. And the other point which we mentioned that, after this International Criminal Court recognizing some of these crimes, and this is a timely opportunity to reflect on our learnings and explore future expressions of solidarity. And then we do have, the Stop the War campaign and solidarity for Palestine, where we are making an effort that promotes the reconstruction of Gaza health system. And we are documenting the human rights violations against health workers in Gaza by gathering the testimonies of attacks against health workers. We do have a gallery, and we are also a part of the BDS. Inspired by the BDS principles, we would like to take up that campaign against, for example, we would like to begin with the pharma companies as well. And we do have a call for action, and that talks about our solidarity with Palestine. And we are right now, trying to raise resources for ADWA Health and Community Association in Gaza. This field hospital, it will increase the capacity of the existing hospital and will benefit more than 15,000 displaced people. They are in need of healthcare. So that's where PHM has taken the initiative to raise resources, and we are that is a systematic campaign we initiated to raise funding. And of course, we are in solidarity with the people of Sudan. And then we have a statement. In fact, we are working, and we are very grateful that Rabia has joined today. Sudan is suffering from a conflict that has been raging since 2023. And then there is a forced displacement, and Sudan is facing a supply of crisis, and that has millions of victims on the brink of food insecurity. And this conflict has thus compounded into the multifaceted humanitarian crisis, which we know. And there are reports which are indicating the violations, and particularly the sexual and gender-based violence. That is something which we would like to understand when Rabia speaks to us. So the PHM has come up with a solidarity statement, and then we are trying to work, with our activists in Sudan. And in solidarity with people of Lebanon, we are very grateful that Zina has joined us today. And we know what is happening in Lebanon, particularly since October 2023, how that region has been experiencing a state of high and ongoing tension. And we know we will hear much more from Zina today. So, but we urge the international community in this context that and to uphold human rights and peace in the region, to prevent any military escalation in Lebanon, and to avoid repeating the current experiences in Gaza and also in other parts of the MENA region. So if this humanitarian disaster were to be repeated anywhere in the world, not just in Lebanon, the international community that must consider its structure, role, effectiveness, and even its existence. So with that, I would like to little bit, these are if you are interested to join our campaigns, please write to us, and then we will be very happy, if you are part of these ongoing campaigns. With that, I would like to introduce our moderator today. Yeah. We are joined today by Sali Hafez, who is also part of PHM, in fact. She is a health system researcher and global health specialist who has worked extensively on health systems in fragile states and low and middle income countries, focusing on the intersection of health, gender, sexual violence, and protection. For the last 15 years, she led multi-country humanitarian response and research, including in Palestine, Sudan, Syria, and Iraq. She is a doctoral candidate and research fellow in decolonizing global health methods at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, a visiting fellow at Hawler Medical University in Iraq. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. And sits at the leadership team of Women in Global Health in Egypt. Over to you, Sali. And once again, thanks to everyone for joining, particularly for our panelists.
Thank you so much, Sarojini and Atsa and the team for organizing today. And thank you all for joining us for this webinar. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, exactly as Sarojini mentioned, from Palestine, Lebanon, and Sudan. And we're here to learn about their activism, but also about the realities across the different contexts and how we can support and stand in solidarity. But before we go to the presentations, I would like to take a moment to reflect and engage more critically with the root causes of violence, acknowledge structural causes of gender-based violence, including colonial violence, apartheid, imperial and capitalism forms of violence, and other forms of macro-level violence that we don't usually engage with. This is an opportunity as well to consider the different forms, but also consider the different micro forms, including social norms and all the patriarchal issues that we face on our daily life and shape what gender-based violence looks like in different contexts. We also take a moment to thank and stand in solidarity with our fellow healthcare workers, advocates, activists, and humanitarians who took their time to be here with us today and share with us some of their learnings and experiences. I don't want to take more time because we want to dedicate more time to hear from them and learn from them. I just want to remind you that please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and to share your questions in the Q&A, and we will take them after the presentations. We'll have 4 presentations for today. We'll start the first presentation on Palestine with Mrs. Randa Siniora. And we're very happy to have her today. She's the General Director of the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, and she's a feminist and human rights defender for the last 38 years. Academically as well, she holds a master's degree from in international humanitarian law from the University of Essex in the UK and a master's degree in sociology and anthropology from the American University of Cairo. We're very proud because she's the first Palestinian woman from CSO to debrief the United Nations Security Council on the status of Palestinian women under occupation during the Women's Peace and Security Open Day in 2018. She also sits in multiple steering groups of Arab civil society organizations and feminist networks, and recently she was selected by the UN Women on the Generation Equality Multi-Stakeholder Leadership Group representing CSOs for the next 3 years. We're very happy to have her. Mrs. Randa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally, for the introduction. And I would like to start to really sincerely thank all of you at the People's Health Movement, PHM, for inviting us, the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counseling, a Palestinian human rights and feminist organization working since 1991 in the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. It is great to hear all the Sarojini. I'm sorry if I didn't say your word. I feel regrets that I did not know about your important network of grassroots organization of this sort working and having presence also in the occupied territories in Palestine, and really working on issues which I thought I'm coming to speak about how we can build solidarities. Already the ground is set for that. We have to see how we can join efforts to do work together, because as we are now starting with the 16 days campaign of activism against gender-based violence, a genocide war is being launched against my people in the Gaza Strip, but also in all other parts of the occupied territory where Israel is conducting systematic policies and conducting a lot of serious and grave breaches of international law, namely the humanitarian law, against the Palestinian civilian population in all parts of the occupied territory. We are witnessing a lot of settler violence that is with the complicity of the Israeli army and police, and we are seeing a lot of vandalism, attacks, and so on. Maybe my colleague will dwell more into settler violence and its impact. But let me go back to where the genocide war is now being launched against the people in the Gaza Strip, where on the shoulders of Palestinian women is the lion heavy load of what is going on. Not only, generally, most of the casualties have been among women and children. 70% of that are women and children. We've seen the displacement of almost 95% of the Palestinian population. No place is safe in the Gaza Strip. People were forced to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, but they have been also attacked and killed. People have been displaced for some of them over 17, 18, 20 times. I cannot tell you how this small area of land, highly populated, the highest populated area compared with the space that they have, and at the same time now they are forced more and more to shelters, to the minimal needs of anybody. We have seen statements on the part of the Israelis from the beginning of the war with the intent of starving the Palestinian population, not providing them with energy, water, food, and this is really what Gallant has made, and we are really commenting on the position of the ICC to issue a warrant against him, because from October 7th, 2023 onwards, he was showing the intention to annihilate the people of the Gaza Strip. And this is what has been practiced in front of televisions, and the people are seeing that, and the war is still ongoing. We're hoping that there will be an immediate, I don't like to say ceasefire, because it's not an equal war between two equal parties. We're talking about a situation where civilian population are being targeted. There are no equal, the people who are paying the price for that are the civilian population, mostly women and children, not to mention that many of the women under these current situations are taking more burdens of taking care of the disabled, the elderly, and the sick people, with the complete destruction of the health system in the Gaza Strip and infrastructures. We're talking about complete targeting of hospitals, medical clinics, everywhere. And we've seen almost around 300 women giving birth in the Gaza Strip on daily basis, without the minimal prenatal, postnatal, or even giving birth in very difficult situations, sometimes without anesthesia. And sometimes they had to exterminate their wombs because there's a risk on their lives. We have seen a lot of practices of, lactating women, not being able to feed their kids with the absence of baby milk and all the minimal needs of life in the Gaza Strip. Maybe if I go on to speak about the catastrophic humanitarian situation, I might take all the time of all participants in this and wouldn't give you a glimpse of what is going on in the Gaza Strip currently. Over 1,500 families have been completely erased from the civilian records. Complete families, 20, 25, 30, many people have completely, there's no name of these people anymore registered in the civilian records. We're talking about shelters that are overcrowded without any kind of privacy to women. And with limited toilets, no dignity kits, no the minimal needs of and priorities of women for you know a dignified natural menstruation for young girls and women. There are real serious challenges in shelters, including increase in gender-based violence. In one of the surveys, quick assessments made by UN Women and the leader feminist movements in Gaza, it has been stated that the minimal priorities of women in shelters are not being met, and the perpetrators of gender-based violence are no more domestic perpetrators within the family, but extended to the providers of services, and who are controlling the shelters because they have all the means and are under the control, and they might also try to abuse women. So we have new forms of violence that is extending from within the family to outside the family. We're seeing the symptom of trafficking in women in a way, or not trafficking, but at least we can say women are forced into, sometimes I don't like to say that because it gives a negative impression, but in overcrowded places where you don't have the minimal needs, women might be forced into prostitution. And also we have seen we can no more document cases of femicide because under the shadow of the war, many things can happen. This jeopardy, or the double jeopardy between patriarchal structures are further enhanced and intensified with colonial occupation, Israeli policies and control, and the siege under which the people live, with the absence of the minimal needs. If we go also on the level of, the only fertility bank that we had in Gaza for women who are not conceiving has been completely destructed, killing even the hopes of the people for future pregnancies and forming families. We have seen a lot of problems related to an increase in, with political prisoners being arrested and being kidnapped, in some cases subjected at checkpoints or in Israeli prisons and detention centers in the Gaza Strip and other parts of occupied territory to sexual violence and abuse. And we have also documented cases of rape. This is really a new phenomenon, problem that has emerged during the unfolding genocide war on Gaza. And we have really done evidence-based data that despite the constraints of addressing these issues, they are being coming to the surface, and some women spoke out openly about them because of their willingness to break the silence and show the severity of this Israeli prolonged military occupation, who is really trying to abuse our bodies and use them as a weapon of war, and insult the Palestinian social fabric, cultural fabric, religious beliefs, and so on, exposing our privacy, trying to attack us in different ways. Now, all of that will really entail a lot of additional burdens of women for the unpaid care responsibilities within our society that extend to the traditional roles of women within the family, And we are, we are not yet mentioning the women with this really entails the responsibilities at women, for women, because these roles are being seen as a continuation of the roles within the household and the family, and therefore all the burden of unpaid care will be on the burdens of women. Women became also in households, they are the main providers of their families after the killing of thousands of their husbands and the male members of the family. So they have to also try to find the means for the living, although now we're talking about all the people depending on humanitarian aid if they can get it, because now starvation is there. Even the bread is, there's no food for the people, no clean water, no minimal needs. And this is really going to, with the humanitarian aid being either controlled by the Israeli entry points into the Gaza Strip, and sometimes also by the Novarish or the war merchants who are also abusing the people, the most poor, the poorest of the people. We have never witnessed that. We are always saying that what we witness now is another Nakba. The 1948 Nakba, when we fled our homes in 1948, prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, is nothing compared with the Nakba that we are living on a daily basis now in Gaza, and with the increase of the violence against the settler violence and the destruction of homes and property, and the constraining of the people with the restrictions of movement in different parts of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, with humiliation and ill treatment and torture by Israeli soldiers and military police at checkpoints and at while people are moving from one place to the other, especially in the West Bank, and the isolation of the city of Jerusalem from other parts of occupied territory. Also, I think that if I want to speak about solidarity, I would say that the feminist movement has to, the global feminist movement has to revise its position in a critical eye. I think that we think that to us Palestinians, 7th of October is a turning point. Nothing will go back to normal after the 7th of October, even if the war ends. And it will end. I don't think it's going to be forever, but the implications will take another 100 years to go back to the point where we were on the 7th of October. And therefore, looking at this, I thought that our case as Palestinians and our right as freedom fighters and our right to self-determination is a feminist issue. To my opinion, it has not been reflected in the global feminist movement. And therefore, the revision is for us why we weren't able to this urgent act for at the action for a call for action on the level of the global women movement, without undermining many of the organizations or individuals that have been really engaged and very much providing solidarity and support to the Palestinian people, especially in the Gaza Strip. So I know that while some is underway, and there is work to, we didn't see a popular movement, a feminist popular movement that is supporting the needs and priorities of women in the occupied territory, but also specifically in the Gaza Strip. Women giving birth in these conditions, we need, I was so happy to hear that there's a field hospital that will serve around 15,000 people. But I think that my idea was that, can we call for action for a specialized hospital for pregnant women and children with amputated limbs, because we have almost 14,000 children with amputated limbs, and the specific needs of pregnant women is lacking. Also, all the hospitals do not have the intensified incubators for children born immaturely, and we have seen an increase of abortions or miscarriages, actually 300%, while there was around, the doctors are saying around 30 cases in specific hospitals. Now we're talking about 90 and 100 cases, which means that the whole environment is not conducive for women to give birth in good conditions, and that will continue for a very long period of time, in my opinion. And therefore, the basic needs for pregnant women and for children who have lost their limbs and are in dire need, not to mention women with chronic diseases that were suffering even prior to the war on Gaza, and now they might have died, or they do not, their survival opportunities are very limited under the current situation. Everybody with chronic diseases are not being able to get their needs. Prior to that, we've seen also in a gender eye, some of the unique situations where these women have been abandoned by their families, or they had to go through their suffering on their own because they got these chronic diseases, especially cancer. And now I do think that these issues that we have to take into account with the increase in disabilities, especially disabilities among women and girls, who will be, further suffering for their lives, and therefore they wouldn't have the equipment to have a decent life. That requires us to really give this additional attention. We've been trying to work with our partners in the global north, but now after the war, I think a change in paradigm should take place, and we should shift the focus on grassroots organizations and also on the global south, and see how we can build solidarities. Also, we as Palestinians always think that any place in the world where there is a just cause, we have to support, but also we want more solidarity. And I think that the ideas that you have, and I always really admire grassroots organizations that are working on the grassroots with the people and know the needs and priorities. And you are really giving me and us as Palestinians a lot of ideas, and especially as feminists, where we can highlight our course for action and how we can move forward. We want ceasefire. We want the BDS to take place. We want arms embargo. We want humanitarian aid to smoothly enter into Gaza. We want to rehabilitate Gaza, but also we want to take the needs and priorities of women victims of this war and gender-based violence into account, especially that women were working on the ground with the people, providing all the needs and psychosocial support. Women leaders were, and feminists were on the ground, and therefore they should be in the decision-making processes in the future,
100%.
After the war.
Thank you so much, Wanda. This has been incredible.
Sorry.
No, I mean, we are really, you mentioned incredible points, including how this multiple layers of violence constitutes a second Nakba. You mentioned all forms of violence that's been experiencing, including sectoral violence in the West Bank, but also genocidal violence in Gaza, starvation, violence against healthcare workers, and destruction of the healthcare system. Obstetric violence, menstrual violence, safeguarding, issuing collective shelters, femicides, potential sexual abuse and liability to sex work, rape and infertility and fertility violence, including killing hope of the people, as you very rightly mentioned. And we hear you the point about solidarity and what do we call it, exceptionalism of Palestinian solidarity in global feminist movement. And we challenge that, and we're trying to build a movement that challenges this kind of exceptionalism, and we stand here with a very clear position about that. And we hear also your call for support and solidarity, including supporting the rebuilding of the health system, the PDS, and arm embargo. Thank you. That was really insightful, and I'm sure we're getting a lot of questions to your points. And now I would like to welcome our second speaker, Ms. Khreim. And Khreim has been a dedicated Palestinian attorney and human rights advocate. She's known for her commitment for gender equity and women empowerment. Very similar to Randa's background, she also holds an LLM. So we have two lawyers here in the house from the University of Canberra, and she specialized mainly in the legal aspects of honor killing and Bachelor of Law from Najah National University as well. Most of her career, she has been working in teaching and as a research assistant in Najah University, Faculty of Law. And she worked extensively with Palestinian NGO sector, in addition to her activism and practice as attorney. Ms. Kifaya served as International Advocacy Coordinator for the Women's Center for Legal Aid and Counselling. And she also documents the violations of international humanitarian and human rights law against Palestinian women and communicates them to the UN mechanism that is dedicated for reporting, including the Special Rapporteur, the Human Rights Council, and the treaty and non-treaty bodies. We welcome you, and we're very happy to have you, Kifaya. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sali. Thank you so much, Sarojini, as well, and Atsa. And thank you so much, Randa, for the information that you have provided concerning the situation. I will be sharing a presentation not to waste any minute, so I just had the request submitted, Sali. I don't know if you can accept that.
I think Atsa is the control. Would you be able to give Kifaya?
Sharing the screen, Kifaya?
It says the host is not allowing multiple presenters sharing for this webinar.
Multiple presentation. All right. Sorry.
Or maybe you can assign me as host or something, and you can remove me after I finish the presentation, but that would be,
I'll just make you a co-host just to help this. You are a co-host. You should be able to share. Do you want to just
Okay.
type?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's working.
All
Yeah,
right.
sure.
Perfect. Okay.
Can share.
I don't know if you can see that.
We can see it.
Yeah.
If you want
Yeah,
to do the slide,
amazing.
so that'll be even better.
Okay. Great.
Thank
Yeah, so I'll be telling you like all about settler tourism through a story of Al Mghayir village. It's one of the villages near Ramallah in the West Bank. I will be trying to give you an overview of the settler situation. Basically, settler attacks have been continuously increasing, so it's not a recent issue. Before October 7th, we used to report 3 attacks per day. Now we have 7 reported attacks per day. And this is like reported attacks. But mainly you need to know that most people, like 98, let's say, % of people would not report settler attacks because they know there is no mechanism of accountability. They don't know where to report it. They don't believe in the system, so it goes unreported. I personally was attacked. I didn't know I can report it somewhere and have some justice to it, but you cannot get any justice or accountability for this matter. And this increase was a result of the latest most right-wing government in the Israeli history. So we have this guy here, Itamar Ben Gvir, who is the Minister of National Security, giving out guns to settlers in areas of the West Bank. We have over 900,000 illegal settlers residing in the West Bank currently. And this is, we say illegal because settlements are illegal under international humanitarian law. It's a war crime to have your population transferred into an occupied area. This is the same minister, Itamar Ben Gvir, doing his thing of violence and inciting against Palestinians in the areas of settlements, in addition to areas of Jerusalem as well. To give you an overview, if you can see the areas in dark blue, these are the areas in which Palestinians are allowed to reside in. In the orange areas, we have settlements. So I don't like to call it the Palestinian territories, it's the Palestinian archipelago. So it's an archipelago of islands, small islands, in which we can commute to sometimes, most of the times we cannot. And in the orange areas, we have the settlements. This is a very, very old map, but it's the only one I could see. The blue dots and with the blue squares are the settlements and outposts surrounding the areas in the West Bank in which we as Palestinians can reside. In these areas surrounding the brown spots, which are the cities that we reside in, we cannot get or commute on these roads that are designated to settlers who are illegally residing in the West Bank. In the past month, like 2 months, we had 12 people being killed by settler attacks, and we make fun of it. We say the only thing gender inclusive about these attacks is women take part in them as well. So we have settlers attacking villages, attacking the areas near the settlements, like I showed you in the map. So if you reside in Ramallah, for example, you have these settlements around you. You know that if you commute through this road, you are more likely to be attacked by settlers who are going on rampage regularly. In the last 2 years, WCLAC had documented settler terrorism in over 17 areas of the West Bank and Jerusalem. We're talking about villages, we're talking about cities, we're talking about areas in the Hebron, and I will go on and tell you the difference between that. And the patterns we see with these attacks is they are mass coordinated attacks. We have hundreds and hundreds of settlers who reside in different settlements. They have WhatsApp groups, they have Telegram groups in which they coordinate these attacks. And during these attacks, they work hand in hand with the Israeli army. The Israeli army's job, according to international humanitarian law, is to provide protection for the occupied people, but it doesn't provide any protection. On the other hand, it works closely with them to close the roads and make it impossible for villagers to leave the village that is under attack by settlers. Settlers are always heavily armed in firearms and flammable materials. And I say flammable materials because we could not identify the materials they used, but the women in the villages told me that they use this substance in plastic bags and they throw it at things, and it's highly flammable, so it catches on fire, including people, cars, houses, barns, and animals, and everything they find on their way. These settlers are always masked. You cannot tell who they are, you cannot tell their identity. They use their t-shirts, or they use specifically made masks for them to hide their identity. They also obstruct ambulances and medical personnel and fire trucks from getting to the area that is under the attack. They also work on poisoning water wells. So in most of these areas, like I showed you around the West Bank, it's mostly agricultural villages. So what they do is they know that these people use the water wells because the Israeli army would not let you get any water wells, new water wells. So it's the old ones, and they poison them with dead animals. We have documented this in Masafer Yatta, in which, because women have to deal with water, like cook, clean, and do the clothing, wash the clothes, they are more likely to be affected and getting sick from the water that they use that have been poisoned by Israeli settlers. We talk about looting of resources. We have documented so many cases of these settlers stealing property, stealing cattle from these villages. And these villagers, because of the constant attacks, they're economically impacted, so they cannot commute from one area to another to find a job. So once they are looted, it's over for them. They have to move to the city and start to find new endeavors to get money to their houses. But this is as a direct result of this impact. This, in addition to indiscriminate attacks and the herbicides that they use and the chemicals, they also cut the olive trees, and they usually specify their attacks during the olive harvesting season in October. They know that Palestinians harvest the olives in October, and they start having more of these attacks. This is in addition to the environmental impact. So the picture you see is taken from Qalqilia. We have settlements that are purely industrial. They're being put on Palestinian land right next to Palestinian villages and houses. We have documented cases in Qalqilia where settlers have factories of leather and pickling factory, and they would dispose the wastewater on the nearby village, killing all of their crops and all of their cattle as a result of that, impacting directly women who live off these crops. I need to say that they have their factories installed in a way that when the wind blows in this area, all of this smoke would go to the Palestinian village to make the people leave. Nobody wants to stay in a polluted area that's constantly under settlers' attack, which also is a war crime. Because if you create a coercive environment for the people to leave, this is a war crime. So you don't have to push them and carry them over to leave the area. But if you create an environment that it's really hard for them to stay, it's considered a war crime under international humanitarian law. One of the indirect impacts on women is early marriages, because most of the people we document with would want their daughters to leave the area in which it's under constant settlers' attack. I want my daughter to go live somewhere else, get married in another city, for example, and not have my daughter being subjected to settlers' sexual harassment, attacks, physical attacks, and the terror that they live in. We have high dropout rates for girls in these areas. High dropout rates because There are no schools. They're not allowed to build schools anymore in the areas that are under sea. The Israeli army would constantly destroy these schools. So girls would have to commute to other villages, other areas, and in most cases, families would have their son commute and not their daughters, so they're more likely to get not to get an education. Cancer and other diseases were documented in areas in which the population is near the factories that the settlements have installed, in addition to tear gas, because when settlers attack and the army tries to protect them, it keeps throwing tear gas. And we have a case of a woman who, because of the tear gas, she was constantly subjected to that. She had cancer as a result of that, according to her medical reports. Domestic violence because of the closures of these areas and the cities, and we have found a link at WCLAC during our hotline that during the times in which the areas are closed constantly, we have high rates of domestic violence. We have more calls to our center. This is in addition to women losing their income as a result of the destruction and the closures and the lack of transportation, lack of communication, lack of electricity, lack of water. So women don't have any income that they can rely on. This is one of the attacks that happened recently in April in Al-Mghayr, and this is right after settlers left the village. And this is a video that shows you the amount of destruction. This is what they do. They start burning everything that they find on their way, including the cars, like I said. And this is like after an hour. This is one of the houses we documented with families, the Shahada family. Luckily, they have managed to escape. But in most cases, I'll show you later on the family that was completely burned alive in Doma as well. And like I said, they obstruct ambulances, they obstruct fire trucks. This used to be a barn in which they kept their cattle. We have greenhouses as well that were completely burned in Al-Mghayr. On that day, we went and we spoke with the chief council. He said that 76 out of the 4,000 people who reside in Mghayr were shot with live ammunition. 76 people. We're talking about mass shooting, indiscriminate mass shooting at the people who live in the village. They have developed these WhatsApp groups in which they start warning each other that we have settlers coming this way, so please start hiding. But people couldn't hide that day because of the amount of settlers that have engulfed the whole village. We have 15 people who were completely disabled following this attack. We have 13 houses that were completely burned, 14 semi-burned, and we have 13 tents completely destroyed, 20 barns were completely destroyed, and we have 150 cattle that were stolen from the villagers in Mghayr. This is the Shahada family. It's the one I showed you the house. This is Noor. She's 17. Noor was shot with live ammunition in her legs. She's good now. She have managed to graduate high school as well. We have Lamia, her mother. She's 42, who tried to defend the house when the settlers attacked. She was also shot in her legs, but she's now good. Amel and Khalid managed to have all of the chickens and all of the cattle of the family. They managed to get them to escape. They led them away from the settlers, and they were really proud of what they did. But it's such a huge responsibility for children to have. We have documented also with a story with Jinan. Jinan also lives off her cattle, so she makes dairy products out of the cattle that she has. And on that day, she had to escape with her life. But when she came back, she found that they have stole all of her sheep, and she was devastated. She was crying when she talked about it, not because it's her livelihood, it's also because she just loved them. And she was crying because she says that every morning I wake up and I tell my daughter, are they back? Are they back? I can hear them. And she goes to the window, she gets out, and it's nothing. She says she always looks in the distance, hoping one day they would return to her. And this is one of she says that the sheep that they take with them that walk, they take it, but the ones that wouldn't walk, they would kill it. And this is a picture that she took. Jinan was also shot in her leg, but she managed to, and she's fine. She's better now. This is one of the documentations that we have made as well, and it shows the complicity of the Israeli army working hand in hand with settlers. And this is, like I said, it's a war crime. So the Israeli army is protecting the settlers, if you can see there in the photo, and they burn the car alive. And these cars are usually in houses. So people have small parking garage under their house. So this is what they do. And this video shows the complicity between the army that is supposed to protect the population and how it works closely with them. Women have also testified that the IOF work hand in hand when they come to the village. I would ask them, did they try to protect you? Did they try to stop the settlers from attacking you? And they would all say no, they would work with them. And this is also a war crime that we have worked on. They also utilize drones, if you see in this picture, to scare the cattle, to scare the shepherds. And they use the drones to have noises to scare the population in villages and rural areas. They live on their own. We don't have police. I need to say there's no any law enforcement, Palestinian law enforcement in these villages. So people are on their own. So if you have any settler attacking you, it's you and your family who have to protect yourselves. This picture here is for a journalist. Her name is Yafa. And settlers also have Telegram groups in which they incite against human rights defenders. Yafa, her picture was published on this group, and they start publishing their address of the human rights defender, publishing that we're going to attack you, you have to be careful, you have to be that. And they start circulating the pictures of journalists and human rights defenders and their addresses and their personal information, trying to intimidate them. This is also one of the t-shirts that they would be wearing. Here it says 1 shot, 2 kills for a Palestinian woman. And here it says, the smaller the target, the harder to hit in Hebrew. So it's not just that they attack, it's also that they are so blatantly proud of it and the amount of harm and damage they inflict. And it shows you that they don't want any birth in this group. So they're proudly attacking pregnant women. This is the family that I told you about. This family was completely burned alive. The baby Ali Dawabshe and his mother and his father were burned alive, and the only surviving was Ahmed Dawabshe. They also died from their injuries in 2015 when settlers attacked the village of Douma. So, these attacks are lethal. They don't attack just to intimidate, they attack to kill. And this is a picture that we always have to say, this is the baby Ali Dawabshe that was completely burned alive. If you see the picture being carried, these are settlers who are celebrating a wedding. And they have the picture of this baby, and they're stabbing the picture, and they have Molotovs. And who was at this wedding is Itamar Ben Gvir, the National Security Minister. So they're proudly celebrating the killing of a family and the burning of a 7-month-old baby, Ali Dawabshe. In Douma, we have also documented Dr. Shireen Dawabshe's story. She has her kindergarten for the village, for the kids in the village, but due to the constant attacks of the settlers, they kept burning the village and they kept attacking the village from the side in which her kindergarten is. All of the families had to take their kids out of the kindergarten. She lost her job. She used to work on her PhD, but now she cannot anymore due to the restrictions that they have. But one day, when she was heading back to the village, she knew that it was under attack by over 300 settlers, that they have surrounded the whole village. But she insisted in getting back to her home, even though her husband was like, no, just wait there in the other village next to Douma. But she insisted because she knew it would be lethal. So when she tried to get back there, she was attacked by soldiers and settlers who threatened to rape her. They pulled her out of the car. They dislocated her shoulder. She was in the car driving. They grabbed her. They started touching her inappropriately. They threatened to rape her, and she thought they were going to carry out their threat and they're going to rape her. And that's when we say that we know if you have any one-on-one confrontation with a settler, you are more likely to be hit. In other cases, groped. We have also documented a case with a sister organization in which a settler raped a Palestinian man. Financial and social impact as well. You can imagine nobody would want to visit relatives in a village that is under constant settlers attack. And this made them so isolated.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm wrapping up.
Yes,
I'm
great.
wrapping up.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's it. I'm wrapping up. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Kifaya. I think that was very, we don't usually get the opportunity to particularly examine settler colonialism and settler violence, and the way you portrayed this from the case of the Mghayr village and the different forms of violence, including how these are organized and mass coordinated. They are not just individual cases, and beyond that, these are just very organized, protected, and coordinated. And for me, it was interesting to see that their effect kind of reached every single area of the daily life of the Palestinians there, including access to healthcare, obstructing medical personnel, as you mentioned, poisoning the water sources, even lots of forms of ecological and environmental violence. And I feel that kind of gives us a little bit of understanding how the local community tries to that kind of violence shapes the local community's behaviors, exactly as you mentioned, including things such as early marriage and domestic violence. And I'm sure we'll have more questions to expand on that in our Q&A. So thank you so much, Khreim. Very thoughtful presentation. And now we would like to go to Dr. Zeina Mohanna from Lebanon, and she's the executive and administrative board member of Amel Association International, with over 20 years of experience in humanitarian work, and she holds a PhD in political studies, specializing in citizenship, human rights in Lebanon, and has consulted multiple UN agencies. And she's also a founding member of Ibtisama NGO and the president of the Middle East chapter of the STARS Foundation. She's also a university professor at the American University of Beirut and teaches courses on human rights, public policy, and civic engagement. Her expertise include human rights, migrants and refugees, counter-trafficking, youth leadership, and women empowerment. Dr. Mohanna has been also active in the humanitarian and development fields in academia for over 15 years. And she's also part of the PHM Steering Council. We're very happy to have Dr. Zeina Mohanna with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sarojini. Thank you, everybody. Really, it's a privilege to be here. And unfortunately, as much as we hear about Palestine, having more details really is much more heartbroken. We cannot imagine we are in the 21st century in 2024, and this level of atrocities is happening worldwide, which is really putting into question the international law. But thanks a lot really for highlighting within the 16 days of activism this topic, because whenever we are reduced to basic assistance, shelter, food, security, etc., sometimes women needs get a bit marginalized, but we should always ensure that we carry on and pull up this agenda to make sure that women are safe and women are in a condition that allows them to sustain their life, because we knew that within war and conflict, how much women really played a role in ensuring stability for the family and playing positive roles to be able to sustain these emergencies, not only for themselves, but for all the families, especially to protect their children and the people with special needs. 2 days after the ceasefire, we hope it lasts. Unfortunately, the war here lasted for 2 months and a half, more around 66 days, and has been very, very, very tough. All of us there is collective trauma here. We cannot put ourselves in Palestinian people's shoes because really more than 13 months have passed. Now we are feeling the PTSD, all of us. It hasn't been easy at all. Nowhere was safe. We were running under, going right and left just to be able to pass the 24 hours. We hope nobody lives in what we're living, and we really pray for mercy for Gaza and all the countries. Unfortunately, we are seeing that there is a plan. Now Lebanon finished, we hope so. And now Syria's starting next, maybe Iraq after. So there's a plan for the region, unfortunately, that is unveiling, but we hope that we are able to really resist and sustain all these atrocities that are happening. Ceasefire has happened, but more than 62 villages on the borders are still are within the phase of the 20 days. And we don't know if they're going to occupy them again. What they did not take by the conflict, they are trying to take it by this ceasefire and advance their missiles forward. It's very worrying what's happening on our borders, but we hope that we will able to get our justice and our land will be there. I am from one of these 62 villages. Our house, family house, is fully destroyed. Amel, part of its 40 centers, 13 of the centers are heavily affected. Some of them cannot function anymore, despite highlighting them as humanitarian. Down the line now, more than within these 66 days, 15,000 were injured, more than 4,000 who lost their lives, more than $3.2 billion of affected household destruction is tremendous. And this time, not only in the south and in Beirut suburbs, but all over the country, where Israel is trying to throw bombs to make sure that there is fragmentation between the Lebanese themselves. And so people left their shelter going back, and they found that all the infrastructure was hit, no water, no electricity, etc., which is going to need huge reconstruction efforts so that these villages come back to their ground. So, and as we saw in Palestine, same for Lebanon, we saw that the same methodologies were used. International law breach, 7 hospitals directly hit, more than 100 primary healthcare centers went out of function, direct targeting for civil defense, the use of the prohibited white phosphorus and maybe other unexploded, material that is prohibited internationally that affected the farmers and their land and led a huge number of people to lose their livelihoods. Unexploded ordnance were thrown without sharing the maps, so we're foreseeing a lot of landmines, and as what happened in 2006, that people will we're going to have more casualties, and unfortunately some landmines in the form of toys where children will get close to it and will end in their loss of their lives. We face something that is also prohibited internationally, more than 3,000 people who were injured in 1 minute at the bombing of the pagers and the talkie-walkies. Unfortunately, lots of things happened. With the displacement, more than 1.3 million people were displaced, which is equal to the quarter of the population that's available on Lebanon, that were sheltered in 1,134 collective shelters. A huge number of them are public schools, which were not ready to accommodate people in classrooms, lack of hygiene that resulted in a lot of problems and a lot of infections for women, and a lot of sanitary issues that left skin problems, scabies, etc. And 80% were among the hosted families. As much as it was big, we saw beautiful solidarity between the Lebanese to accommodate each other, despite that the location where people had to stay became very small. Women's issues, mainly lack of dignity of sanitary pads, dignity kits that where we try to really distribute a big number, but also female UTIs due to the lack of clothing, and they were not able to address the hygiene and sanitary components. We saw some facets of exploitation, but also facets of human trafficking, where we know that internationally there is still need to increase the identification and the ability to measure and see what types of trafficking is there being for women, children, and all the members. Also, we have heard that violence have increased due to overcrowdedness. Cases of rape took place, but we know that in general, GBV and rape, despite it's there, but documentation still remain low, which is also an issue, especially in the Arab world. Lebanon have been facing a protracted crisis since 2019. So Lebanon really faced all types of emergencies since the past 5 years, starting with a revolution, followed up by monetary crisis, followed up by a socioeconomic crisis, political crisis, the explosion, which was the biggest after Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and then the a war, internal displacement, the existing refugee crisis of Syria, and really Lebanon has supported Syria and Turkey in the natural disasters, so really all the above. So we can say that already we reached this war depleted, being the woman, men, everybody's mental health is so much affected, where we already have increased the programming previously, but also the frontliners are depleted. So we reached this war where we don't have there's a socioeconomic challenge, definitely putting question marks on an economic embargo. Was it natural, or that was part of a bigger plan? And definitely we know that the circle of violence affects the aggression of children, and the circle of violence that goes within the family, with gender-based violence and other, but also the huge number of traumas that are highlighted. Child protection is a big issue. In the collective shelters, we have witnessed the increase of aggression from the parents to the children due to this stretched situation, which definitely leave women stranded and in unfavorable condition to sustain their lives, where child protection activities, we have been conducting a lot, recreational activities, parenting skills, etc. Lebanon, that has the highest refugee per capita in the world, that proved the biggest solidarity since the Syrian crisis, who accommodated 1.5 million refugees in comparison to its 4 million population. And the existing 250,000 of migrant workers coming from Africa and Southeast Asia that also are here, left, unfortunately, these last two categories with more vulnerability when Lebanese are challenged themselves. So there was need to have specific programming for refugees and migrants to address their needs, noting that Lebanon received only 15 to 20% of the needs to address the emergency crisis and the basic assistance. Unfortunately, going back to the Syrian crisis, Lebanon, on the Lebanese land, we have seen traits of survival sex due to the protracted crisis of Syria that stayed for since 2011 till today, unfortunately. And the main issue is to be able to ensure basic assistance and support their children. We know that now with the huge number in Lebanon and in Syria of men going to join the war, we are now with a huge number of female head of household who lost their husband, which leave them also very much affected in the situation and really need very close programming and support. Polygamy was among the people in Syria coming from rural areas, which had a huge number of early marriage already existing, but we saw that it aggravated a lot with the crisis because forming new families, even if the couple are very young, allows them to access basic assistance. So very important topic that we have seen how much war and crisis changed demography, changed stereotypes, changed also how people react to things. And one of the examples is when there was a donor fatigue in 2016, 2015. Priority was provided to women head of household, etc. So we have seen that men who less likely would marry a female with children change this apparatus because they wanted to access basic assistance. So this is one example of many that could play in favor or against women in war and conflict and could draw really new patterns that are worth studying. I don't want to take much of the time, and I'll have, unfortunately, to get out in like 10 minutes, but I'll try to say for the audio, for the Q&A, just want to send a message of peace for all the women and all the girls and being in Palestine, Lebanon, and Sudan, and I will hear, I'm sure, outrageous story from Rawia also. It's not acceptable that nowadays we are faced with this life of this level of atrocities. International law is put into question again, and we need to call for really protective mechanisms among our levels to ensure increased support for vulnerable population. But the opportunity that we're seeing here is that a lot of these women who lived now what's happening, especially reviving the Palestinian cause, which is not only about Palestine, this is an issue of justice, that if we accept of what's happening in Gaza, we accept lots of other things, which is a no-no for all of us. But we are happy that the new generation is witnessing this to really have a new generation of militant youth who will fight for more justice forward and hopefully ensure more justice for Palestine, Lebanon, Sudan, and all Yemen, and all the regions all over the world. We know that a lot of females are outspoken, have been advocates, and they have been raising these voices, and will keep on doing this, hopefully, to ensure sustainability and support for all the women and girls. Thanks a lot, and I'll be available.
Thank you so much, Zainab. This has been really incredible, and we share with you And we stand in full support and solidarity to you and to Amel, which we remember very kindly hosted us in PHM a few years back. And whenever I remember how 13 of the centers have been affected, and I go back to the photos of when we visited 2 of the health centers that Amel operated for the Syrian refugees. I feel deeply hurt and deeply affected, but also, yeah, maybe we also really thankful for your thoughts today and sharing with us all of your perspectives. And we agree with you that this is a state of collective trauma. We're very grateful for the perspective that you brought about being a frontline person who has to respond immediately in your country, but in the same time you have to take a step back and to share what is the situation like to a group like us, an international group, which is not an easy thing to do. So we thank you so much for this. And I agree with you about the consequences of the violence in Gaza on the global acceptance of a violation of the international norm-based system. And I think the consequences will be very severe, not only for the region, but for the threshold of violence accepted across different places. And this is what we should stand very firmly against. And I invite, if anyone have any question to Dr. Zeina, please share it in the chat. Maybe you will be able to respond to 1 or 2 questions before you leave. But thank you so much for being with us. And now I would like to welcome our colleague and very good friend, Rawia Mohammad. And Rawia has been working she's Sudanese health policy planning and health system strengthening specialist. She's also a social activist and right to health and women empowerment advocate. Rawia is a member of the steering committee of the Young Arab Researcher in the Social and Economic Rights Council, and also Sudan's country representative in the People Health Movement. She's also a member of the Gender Justice Group and a very well-esteemed fellow. So without further ado, Rawia, over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Dr. Randa and Kifaya. Thank you, PHM, for having me today. It's an honor, a privilege for me to be here and speak about my country, Sudan, in this in a time that I'm lucky that I am here. I survived. I can speak about what is happening because there's a total blackout, and a lot of people are still on the ground and they cannot even share because of the total blackout there, the lack of electricity, the lack of telecommunications, the lack of internet, because of the conflicting parties are like destructing the infrastructures, and the voices that we hear from Sudan is very shocking, and the situation is lacking media attention because there is nothing that shows up. So it is a great responsibility for us, the survivors, the people who are who can speak or can just connect to other networks that to share and to tell the people what is happening actually in Sudan for almost 2 years. It's more than 17 months right now, but so minimum is known about the situation in Sudan. I can say that I can conclude what is happening in Sudan. It is the same exactly what is happening in Gaza. While Dr. Randa was speaking, I was just closing my eyes and just like, this is what I'm going to say. So it is the same situation which is happening in Sudan, but none is known about it at totally. And while looking to the presentation that Kifaya just presented, it just traumatized me because this is what is happening in Sudan, and just we cannot even photocopy or just send photos and what to see what is happening back there, because even if you're like taking shots, you will be like connected, all your cameras and your mobile phones will be taken off from you. Or even you cannot even send it because you're not having internet access. My 7-year-old son, Sali, she knows him. When he looking to the news and the Gaza news on the TV, he says, "Mom, is that Khartoum or is it Gaza?" So he just because he witnessed what's happening in Khartoum and in Sudan. So that is we are at the two sides of the same coin, what is happening in Gaza and in Sudan. And interestingly, we are sharing the same flag colors. This is our Sudanese flag, if you can see it. Just we have it is just like the red triangle and the green triangles as well. So it is not something that we are just like proud of, that we are sharing the same misery in the world, that it just doesn't care about both the Sudanese, the Lebanese, or Palestinian people. So if I would like to speak about what is happening in Sudan, Sudan as one of the low middle income countries and least developed countries in the world, the struggles of women are not new. That people, even before the war, were facing with many financial burdens and gender and domestic violence, because a lot of women have to work in non-structured segments to provide for their families, because and they have to work even if they are we witness like child trafficking and child work at that in housekeeping and food and beverage serving. So just to provide, and the people, women, Sudanese women, are oppressed from even experiencing their political views, and they have like constraints on dress codes on the streets, and they experience violence with the police authorities. A lot of cases of that, of like hitting girls on the streets, they're giving them to trials because of their dress code. Even the trousers were banned in Sudan. Wearing without a scarf were totally banned under the Sharia rules. After the December 28th revolution, things just getting better to women, and they just kind of like this country just experienced an instability in the financial situation. They took off the list of terrorism, and women could like engage in the political and decision making, but took place from and both the parties, the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces, just took over the government from the civilian parties. Things started to getting worse, and the water under the bridge, that's just because the conflict just rising between the two conflicted parties, and until they clashed in the April 2023, and since then no one in Sudan is safe, no woman, no girl. All this country is under turned to ashes. We have been experiencing massive destruction in every sector. If we would like to speak about the health system could not stand more than 2 weeks old. 87% of the hospitals in Khartoum, which is due to the centralized health system. It is all the health services were in the capital city were of service. People are suffering. They have like losing so many families lost their providers because they were killing them. The RSF are killing the boys, or either kidnapping them and just giving them hostages as a human shields, because the nature of the battle in Khartoum, the army has this airstrikes and the RSF on the ground with the missiles and anti-aircraft, and they just colonizing our houses. They taking you out of your house. The Israeli the IDF are very cowards and anti-humane, but I might respect them because they are not doing the same as what is the RSF are doing to the Sudanese people, because they're just like taking you off your house, humiliating men in front of their families, sexually assaulting, threatening to rape, all things. They even just took the presidents of the prison, so that there are cases of looting and of houses. So if you didn't have something to take worthy to take it from your house, they just like kidnap girls. And there is reported cases in Sudan of slavery, sexual slavery, and they're just selling girls like $600 US. There's a place that is called Khor Jahannam in South Darfur. Khor Jahannam can translate it to the Hell's Creek. There's reported cases of human girl slavery or prostitution working in Sudan. And they just and the worst thing in the cases of the GBVs and gender-based violence and the human trafficking in Sudan, it is just like it is a systemic. The magnitude of that action can be described as an epidemic. It is just like it has. They might be trying to insult the families, or it has a shadow of a civil or tribal differences. So that's the bad idea of the bad side of that, because it's just they can target people according to their tribal origin. So, based on that actions on people in Sudan, they will have experiencing massive waves of displacement. In Sudan, there's reported that over 11 millions are internally displaced. The majority of them are experiencing secondary and tertiary, and even now we are on the brink of the quaternary displacement. And over 26 millions of the population are facing and are at the risk of a mass starvation, because both parties are the army and the RSF are just manipulating people and using hunger as weapons. The government, which is led by the Sudanese army, they put so many bureaucratic obstacles, and the RSF, they're just like cutting the areas for the humanitarian to enter, or even they can. There are cases that even the both parties and at their areas of control, they are manipulating people and they're just trading food for sex. So that's what is happening, and the bad consequences for that is it when you have no rape control or rape management devices or protocol, and there is a lot of cases of people are born, children were born and illegally, and so the women, a lot of girls are just living right now with the guilt of being raped and trying to raise a child of their raper, so the assaulter. So that is, the numbers are shocking, the stories are terrifying. There is reported cases that a lot of women just committed suicide or just throw themselves into the canal just to escape from raping in the areas. That is what we know for so far. The numbers are shocking, but they are yet not accurate because we don't know all the it's not all recorded, because as I mentioned earlier, the lack of communication, the fear of shame that you are just reporting that, and so yeah, that is what is happening to girls now. In other area, the consequence of the internal displacement, people tend to stay as in Lebanon and in Palestine, tend in the crowded shelters. Many of families were just moving to with their relatives or just sharing houses with a lot of people in other villages in the safer areas. Also, the incidence of assault or just forced marriage at that time, because sometimes you cannot provide or you cannot give rental, so that just like you cannot say no to arranged marriage at that time, especially if a lot of girls were working in Khartoum or other cities, and it is now they lost their income, so they have to get married just to flee from Sudan, or just because they can stay at that house without paying the rent, or their family that can pay something for that, because a lot of people, as I mentioned, they lost everything they have. They lost our houses, anything, their source of income. The schools are closed. There is accumulation of. They just trying to resume schools, but the people who are attending the last secondary school to entering the university, they cannot go anywhere because there's accumulation of 3 years. They are not going to enter so that's why they cannot be entering the universities. And even the borders were closed to all Sudanese peoples, and so this is very facing difficulties in entering legally entering the nearby borders. So that's why people just tend to take a very difficult and risky journeys on the desert just to enter, because if they return home, they will be killed. If they go and move forward, they will be killed. So they were just taking the risk to enter any countries illegally. So yeah, that's what is happening in Sudan. And in addition to, I can conclude and say, we're not taking so long time. Everything that is applies to Lebanon, Palestine is applied to Sudan. We need to raise voices and just networking with the Palestinian and Lebanese voices to just that Sudan is also with us. We are here with us in this planet. No one sees what is happening, and so just be our voice in that. Thank you very much for having me. I'm just getting emotional when I speak to Sudan, especially when you have like sometimes the survival guilt. So excuse me for that. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Raya, and we're very grateful to have you and your what you mentioned, and please, we're all here for you to support as well and stand in solidarity with you and people of Sudan. And indeed, it has been quite alarming, the very limited media attention and coverage that we hear about Sudan and what's happening there, with the whole level of starvation, but also violence and destruction and forced displacement, and utilization of sexual violence as a tool of war. We still get less and less coverage, and we have to take a moment and then question why. Yeah, and I think for many of us the answer is quite clear, and we have also to reflect on that. What you mentioned about what is the common and different realities and similarities with Gaza in terms of the wide scale of destruction and destruction of health services, attacks, and everything, something we definitely observe and echo, but also would like to highlight the very different legal frameworks that govern both situations, and although we share the same suffering, but where we operate quite different spaces, and maybe this is something to reflect how we can, exactly as you mentioned, build on each other's and support each other's, and learn how we can engage better with these systems and challenge them as well, change them if we can. What you mentioned about how people have been resorting to very risky coping mechanisms, such as taking a very risky trip in the desert, basically going to the unknown, going to the Maghul just to survive, tells us a lot about the scale of the violence, as you mentioned, all the things about kidnapping, suicide because of fear of rape, and discrimination and stigma for children who are born out of the wedlock, and all the sorts of violence that you mentioned. Yeah, will make us as well think and reflect on that and how we can support and stand in solidarity as well. I really thank all the 4 panelists for incredible presentations and very enriching, and we learned a lot from your experience and lived experience. And I think we'll go now. We don't have much time, so maybe we'll have 1 question per each of the panelists. And I will start with you, Randa, and we have a really good question about if you can please elaborate on how gender-based violence has been used as a deliberate tool by the Israeli occupiers to exert control and suppress resistance and dismantle community structures. And how do these tactics specifically target women and impact the broader Palestinian struggle for liberation? You're on mute.
Thank you, Leah, for this question. I think Leah
Yeah, and
raised.
I'll ask you, sorry to be, I'll ask you to have 3 minutes for the response. Sorry.
No, I want to try to be short, because it's a very huge question. It's not easy to answer it. The main theme is that power relations are not equal. We're talking about occupying power that is using all its force as against a civilian population. Taking into that context, we are still in patriarchal structures that are really identifying what is social values, religious values, cultural values that the society highlights in our context, and therefore abusing the bodies of women or trying to pressure through the control that the occupying power has over, for example, during military raids or bombardments or entering into villages and towns at very late hours where they sum up all the family members, male members in one side and women in another side with the children. And sometimes they send messages. In many of the cases that we documented, they tried to embarrass women by telling them to explain the intimate relationship with their husbands, for example, in front of the extended family. And that in our society is like defaming and insulting and humiliating. These are some examples. Or at checkpoints when they try to nude search the women with the absence of a male soldier, like in the old city of Hebron, or kidnapping men and one woman in a truck, which we saw on social media with only, and we took her testimony later when she was released, naked men, and she is like veiled and put in that situation only because she refused the arrest of her children. So they took her and put her in a very awkward position, or taking really using instruments to rape women or to insult them, or to show their bodies in front of other women soldiers in detention centers and so on. All of these are means. Sometimes they pressure men in order to confess by threatening of raping their wives or their sisters or mothers or whatever. And that is really not, this is the direct sexual violence that they use, but they use other means because they are in control. Women married to Jerusalemites who are living in Jerusalem are completely controlled by the Israeli policies who have illegally annexed Jerusalem, and therefore women endure violence because the law does not stand on their side, and further enhances the patriarchal structures and the control of men over their lives. So men dominate. They can decide whether they give a permit, apply for permits for women to reside, and so on. Women who are really in that situation heavily depend on the husband to apply for family unification or for permanent permits. And therefore, if they decide to leave the vicious circle of violence, this means that they might not be able to have custody, to see their children because they cannot enter into occupied annexed Jerusalem, and many other problems that is not directly directly sexual violence or directly threatening with rape, or actually committing rape or arresting or vandalizing, but also through other means of controlling all aspects of Palestinian life, and therefore undermining women's, and that is the double jeopardy between colonial occupation and patriarchal structures in our society. Thank you.
That was a really well put together conclusion. This kind of dichotomy that we try to engage with and to kind of analyze is not only the patriarchal society, it's not only the colonial, they are both of us, and they both shape what is violence and what's violence against women. So thank you so much, Randa, for this incredible conclusion. And my next question is to Kifaya. We want to understand a little bit how the particular Israeli settler colonialism create different realities for women and girls in Gaza and West Bank, or in other ways, how the violence against women are different. Is it different forms of violence, different scale of violence?
Okay. I don't think we know any other reality, so I don't know if it's different. Like anyone who's born after 1948, this is all we know. And this is such a difficult question to answer, to be honest. I don't know what our reality could have been like, but I can tell you that, like, when we focus on settler terrorism, and we call it terrorism because it's not just violence. Violence is merely a method that they utilize to scare the population. And it's just heartbreaking to see, to see how much, every time I try to get to my city of Nablus, I work in Ramallah, I live with my parents in the city of Nablus. Every time I go to Nablus, I see how much the settlements are expanding, and we are not allowed to visit these areas that they take. So we know for a fact that this is the last time I would see this mountain, and we're getting suffocated day by day. And it's not just impacting women and girls, it's impacting everyone who lives in Palestine, and that's why it's called the war crime. And that's why I would encourage you to read the last report that was published, the last two reports that were published by Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur on the Palestinian territories. She spoke about how Palestine turned into an archipelago that people cannot commute between each city. I'll just show you one last picture because I forgot to add this one. This is Hanan Abu Salame. She was killed on the 17th of October while harvesting olives in her village of Faqua. She was killed by settlers. So they gathered, they knew that villagers were going to get their olives today, and they just stormed them and they kept shooting people, and she died as a result. And it's not just that, because we have such a connection to the land, because these women know every single plant, every single weed. They have a name for it. They use it to cook, they use it for medicine. And then one day you're not allowed to get to that mountain. You're not allowed to get to your olives. You're not allowed to get any of that. And of course, it has created a different reality. And I would not be able to speak about Gaza, obviously, because of the 17,000 women have been killed in a year. I don't know what other reality can anyone explain, to be honest. I hope that was...
Actually, there are attempts of settlements being in the northern part of Gaza now. They are using the war on Gaza and all the bombardment and the attacks on the people and trying to evacuate the north. Some settler posts have been already planted on the northern part of Gaza. And women's commuting problem is another thing. I just took that because they are adjacent to the land, as Kifaya said, and they are, the husbands go for work outside the home. They are continuing the work around the land, and therefore they are the victims directly coming in contact with the settlers. Girls cannot go to school because of the difficulties of being attacked and so on. So the families within patriarchal structures also will reconsider. The hygiene issue, the lack of water, makes women's burdens additional. They have to go and fetch the water, and on their way they will be attacked, and they will be subjected to terror and violence of the settlers. So everything, because they are adjacent to homes and agricultural land, they are, or in Bedouin communities, they are around the home and around the cattle and around their own livelihood. This is why the additional suffering of women that has a different component, for example, women who are menstruating in the old city of Hebron, where the soldiers control the population because of some 400 or 600 settlers. Israeli settlers residing in the city, they don't go to school because they expose their pads and their sanitary kits, dignity kits in front of everybody, or search them, and they get embarrassed. So they don't go 1 week or 5 days to school because they don't want to get embarrassed. So this is the gendered impact of the settler violence and terrorism against Palestinian women and girls.
It's
as well.
It's a very good point that you mentioned. And indeed, I mean, even if you go and look at the list of the items that have been denied entry to Gaza, you will see very basic things that no one usually would obstruct, or such as very basic menstrual hygiene management supplies, but also the safe delivery kit. It's literally a piece of clean cloth to help with the safe delivery of women. And these are all banned. These are all things that are considered by the Israeli army as dual use, that can be used for other reason, which is outrageous, of course, of how they also instrumentalize humanitarian aid and instrumentalize some of the humanitarian processes to prevent care and to, yeah. Thank you so much, Randa and Kifaya. And I'm not sure if Zena, you're still with us and can take a question.
Yes, sorry for the background noise, but yeah, I can.
No worries. Maybe very briefly, if you can share with us, you mentioned about the fragile and vulnerable conditions of the Syrian refugees and domestic workers. And to help with building the solidarity and support, would you like to share with us more about that? And if there are any starting programs or projects to support these particular groups? And if Amel would like to share with us any of their future plans, so we can share that as well with our colleagues and networks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sali. Very important question. Actually, in general, for the general population, we are doing social cohesion programming because everybody's afraid for a next civil war. Because that's something that the enemy was also trying to play on due to our existing civil war that lasted for more than 17 years. So this is one thing that we are trying to mainstream among all of our programs, being health, child protection, education, support to migrants, to refugees, etc., to ensure that the Lebanese really move on what happened here in a peaceful manner, so that it doesn't escalate further problems that nobody's really can afford. So what we are doing, we have part of our 40 centers, 12 were affected, but also the war gave us an opportunity to try to open in additional areas where displacement have increased. And we have to say that 50% of Amel workers were displaced themselves. So also that was a very important model on how displaced were supporting displaced and the resilience that we always speak about. But to answer your questions, our programming include a lot of psychosocial support. It included psychological first aid for everyone to really calm their anxieties and their fears and their traumas and their loss of members of the family or destruction of their houses, and the harsh conditions that we're living on, and the airplanes that were above our head all the time that were really very affecting. But for women in specific, we are doing case management for cases that need thorough support, distribution of dignity kits and sanitary pads and food and non-food items. We distributed more than 40,000 items, and we did more than 45,000 health consultations across Lebanon through our teams to address these issues. So definitely sexual and reproductive health is also among our biggest component. And one thing that is quite pioneering at the level of Amel, where also the Ministry of Public Health was very welcoming to it, and now they're including in their accreditation, is to include a midwife across board of our teams. So the minimum package is usually a doctor, a social worker, and a nurse. But we have seen how much really including a midwife with this team addresses women issues, especially for prenatal and postnatal care, but also for women general health. And we have seen also how much really addressing women's health have led to a lot of empowerment for women, being at the level of family planning or at the level of contraception that allowed them to enter the job market. So all of these things that I'm sure you have a lot of studies, and Sarojini is leading on a lot of these issues, but how much really the assistance ensures empowerment even in crisis and allows for women to be in a better status. But now across the board, at the first rescue and emergency phase, it was mostly direct, quick impact. But definitely now we are, since the ceasefire is over, we are working on our reprogramming to move from emergency to recovery and see what could happen to what are the needs back home. And definitely this is a long-term programming that we're going to work on to ensure to address people's issues. But yeah, the first thing I could tell you are still in the observation phase and quick assessment to see what are the dynamics. People are able to go back to their homes or they are livable, etc., and see what are the needs. But already 2 days past, PTSD started to pop up. So a lot of things needs to be addressed on the long term.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Amel, and we really acknowledge your resilience, but also I can't even imagine how you would be in the state of all the time adapting and readapting your programs to the new reality. So really thankful for sharing, and I invite everyone to go and check Amel's website and consider as well supporting their great efforts. And my last question to you, Rawia, maybe in 1 minute because we have to wrap up. How do you feel regarding the global feminist support, what's happening in Sudan, particularly in relation to the visibility, and how we can support the response better, particularly the response to sexual violence and rape?
Okay. As I mentioned, yeah, like the magnitude of little is known about Sudan, so that's just like small voicing and just giving out as I do. So you can just like network and connect and be the voice and raise the issue with that. So just they can see what is happening in Sudan. In Sudan, there's humanitarian in other cities that in other countries that can address things, but in Sudan things are available but are very expensive, and people cannot just get their kits, so they're just like using clothes or anything for as a sanitary kits or something. Even if that woman, when they're getting to delivery, there is no water to, so they have to, when they operate, so they just buy drinking water and get it to the med teams so they can wash their hands. There's no electricity, nothing as well. So we need to collaborate with every feminist and movement and raise the voice that there is a suffering here in Sudan. Sudanese women are suffering. They need attention for that. Very little is known, even for us. For the past 2 months, there's a genocides in so multiple cities in Sudan. We even as Sudanese, we know nothing about it because it is totally controlled by the RSF. So even regarding the food insecurity, even we cannot like buy bulk supplies to deliver to that side because they are going to loot them. They are living among us. They are just controlling that. So the situation is bad in Sudan. So pray for us and be our voice for Sudanese. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rawia, and thank you so much for all our incredible panelists, Rwanda, Kifaya, Zaina, and Rawia. This has been a really incredible webinar, and we learned a lot about our shared suffering, but also about how they are also very different and very different realities to many. And we take this opportunity to stand in solidarity, and we wish that we will continue being part of this global movement. You always have our support, and we thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Sally, for facilitating. Wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally. I just want to end. Would you like to say he's here, and Roman is our global coordinator, and then as Sally said, we continue our solidarities. I think we will definitely reach out to you all. And then how do we work together? I think now it is a time to plan our action plan. How are we going to move forward? And what kind of solidarities we can express from People's Health Movement globally. And we are very happy that all of you could join us today. And this is something forging new solidarities, I think, with new feminist group into PHM. And then we would like to invite you all to be a part of gender justice and health thematic group of PHM. I'll share the details. Roman, would you like to say a couple of lines? Hope he's there. Oh, or maybe he's not.
We'll just promote him just 1 second. He's there in the attendee. Roman, you can unmute yourself now.
Yes,
Can you-
I am now. Sorry, I couldn't find the microphone. I hear carefully the presentation of our comrades from Lebanon, Sudan, Gaza, and so on. I am very grateful because of your participation. We have been very solidary with the people of Gaza, Palestine as a whole, Sudan, and Lebanon, and I will continue being solidarity and proposing different actions within the frame of the Stop the War campaign that we have in place already. So I think we need to strengthen our solidarity campaign with the all the hospital in Gaza, in the north of Gaza. We are raising funds. We need to raise more funds. The hospital need to continue caring the people in the region. So that is a commitment that we will maintain, that we need to maintain. But also we need to make it visible how the war and the Israeli army members has been violating the women human rights, especially gender violence regarding many things that you denounce in this webinar today. I think we need to publish this. Maybe we need to agree on a document that we can move forward to know what is happening with women in the region. So that is very important for us. And thank you very much, comrade. We will continue. That is our commitment, supporting your struggle for self-determination, emancipation from this genocide and war that you have been suffering in the region. Thank you very much for this.
We're looking forward to work with you all, really, and to join efforts in all your urgent actions and calls for action. And I'm sure we will find means to work together and widen the solidarity among us all.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Sali, and thanks to all the interpreters who joined much earlier. And thanks, Miguel, for coordinating the communications part. Thanks to all the participants. That's anything else to say, but we are with you. Please, we will share with you the information and material and about our campaigns. And then we would like to have you all in PHM, and then let's work together, all our solidarity with you all. Ravia, we need to think about a little bit more how we can support as PHM. You are a part of PHM, in fact. If you can think of a couple of things, what we can do right now, we have this Stop the War campaign, and we can also plan, the statement which we have issued, but beyond the statements, we need to think about a little bit more, it's not the statement alone. Yeah.
Yes. And if I might add something, off the record, we have what we call Sudan, the Sudanese people, as the unofficial name from decades ago, we call Sudan Aza, our Aza. So that's when that is the name that we call it for our country. So when there's like a small campaign, when the war started in Gaza, people were talking Gaza for Gaza. They're the same color, the same letters, the same thing. So we just sad for what is happening in the world. We can like in Palestine, in Lebanon, and so just we wanted to share that. I'm pretty sure that no one is knowing this information as well. So thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, please do that. Yeah, thank you all.